Every morning, you wake up and make choices. You decide what to eat, which shirt to wear, and whether to answer an email. These choices feel entirely yours. You experience yourself as the ultimate author of your life, navigating the world with conscious control. But the brain is a physical organ. It is built from neurons, synapses, and electrochemical signals. And because it is a physical system, it is governed by the exact same laws of cause and effect that dictate the movement of planets, the flow of rivers, and the collision of billiard balls. In 1814, the mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace proposed a thought experiment. He reasoned that if a superintellect, often called Laplace's demon, knew the precise location and momentum of every particle in the universe at any given moment, it could perfectly calculate the future. For this intellect, nothing would be uncertain. If we apply that logic to human biology, the results are severe. It means that the chemical cascades in your brain producing your current thoughts were triggered by prior states, which were triggered by your environment and genetics, forming an unbroken chain stretching all the way back to the Big Bang. Your decisions were physically inevitable before you were born. We are trapped between our lived experience of freedom and the cold logic of physics. To understand how human agency actually works, we have to strip away the comforting illusion that we operate outside the laws of nature, examine what neuroscience actually reveals about our choices, and build a definition of responsibility that survives contact with reality. For a long time, the defense of free will relied on finding a flaw in classical physics. In the 20th century, physicists found one. As we zoom in past cells and molecules down to the subatomic scale, the clockwork predictability of the universe breaks down. At the quantum level, particles do not follow strict, predetermined paths. Their behavior is probabilistic. The exact time a radioactive atom decays, or the path an electron takes, cannot be perfectly predicted. The universe contains genuine, irreducible uncertainty. But injecting quantum mechanics into the brain does not rescue free will. On the left, you see the strict determinism of macroscopic physics. On the right, the erratic behavior of subatomic particles. Randomness is a break in the causal chain, but randomness is not intent. If your decision to accept a job or move to a new city is caused by a random quantum fluctuation in your neural network, you did not author that choice. You were simply the victim of a biological accident, a roll of the cosmic dice. What we want is rational self-control, the ability to act based on our values and deliberations. A choice dictated by prior causes isn't free, but a choice caused by nothing at all isn't a choice. Neither absolute determinism nor quantum randomness provides a foundation for traditional, unconstrained free will. The challenge to human agency gets much sharper when we look at how the brain actually processes decisions in real time. In 1983, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet attached EEG sensors to subjects and asked them to flick their wrist whenever they felt the urge. They watched a specialized clock to note the exact millisecond they consciously decided to move. This timeline visualizes the sequence of events. The physical action happens at 0 milliseconds. The subjects reported feeling the conscious urge to move at -200 milliseconds. But a specific buildup of electrical activity in the motor cortex, the readiness potential, began at -550 milliseconds. The brain began preparing to physically move more than a third of a second before the subject was aware of any intention to act. The conscious mind did not initiate the sequence. It merely received an update about a process already underway. That gap was measured in fractions of a second. Decades later, neuroscientist John Dylan Haynes used functional MRI scanners to look deeper, monitoring subjects as they chose to press a button with either their left or right hand. By running the brain scan data through machine learning algorithms, Haynes and his team found they could predict which button the subject would press up to 10 seconds before the subject felt they had made a choice. The data allowed observers to know a person's decision long before the person themselves did. To consciously author your next thought, you would have to think it before you think it. As author and neuroscientist Sam Harris notes, you can do what you decide to do, but you cannot decide what you will decide. Thoughts simply emerge into consciousness from the dark machinery of your biology. If neural networks finalize decisions seconds before they reach awareness, the feeling of authorship arrives after the work is done. Consciousness acts as a late-stage witness to an execution process it did not initiate. However, jumping to the conclusion that we are entirely passive passengers ignores the messy reality of biological systems. In 2012, researcher Aaron Scherger re-examined Libet's data and proposed a different interpretation of the readiness potential. This graph demonstrates Scherger's stochastic model. The brain is constantly humming with spontaneous, random neural noise. The readiness potential isn't necessarily a finalized subconscious decision to move. It is simply this background static fluctuating over time, drifting closer to a critical threshold. When that neural noise crosses the line, it triggers a response. In this model, consciousness is deeply involved. It acts as an active monitoring system, detecting when a spontaneous fluctuation is strong enough to be crystallized into a deliberate action. Even Libet recognized that his experiment left room for agency. He pointed out the 200 milliseconds between becoming aware of the urge to move and the moment the wrist actually flicked. In that split second, the conscious mind can intervene. It can evaluate the bubbling subconscious impulse and veto the action before the muscles contract. We may not have absolute control over which desires surface in our minds, but we possess the capacity to suppress them. This is often called free won't. Your conscious awareness may not be the origin point for every urge, but it acts as a highly evolved biological filter. It sits at the final gate, evaluating, rejecting, or approving impulses, preserving a crucial mechanism for self-regulation. This biological reality aligns closely with compatibilism, the view held by the majority of contemporary philosophers. Compatibilism argues that physical determinism and human moral agency can exist at the same time, provided we stop defining free will as magic and start defining it as a specific type of cognitive processing. Philosopher Harry Frankfurt provided a structural way to understand this. At the most basic level, biological organisms have what he calls first-order desires. A hungry animal feels a biological impulse to eat the food in front of it, and that signal routes directly to an action. There is no deliberation. Humans possess a higher level of cognitive machinery. We have second-order desires, the ability to reflect on our own cravings. If you are fasting for a medical test, you feel the first-order urge to eat, but your second-order values intersect that signal and inhibit the action. For philosopher Daniel Dennett, this capacity for reflection is the entire point. Through evolution, human beings have developed an incredibly sophisticated neural architecture. We can model future scenarios, weigh long-term consequences, and adjust our behavior based on new information. Dennett argues that demanding a version of free will that operates outside the laws of physics is a distraction. The freedom worth wanting is simply the capacity of your brain to be reason-responsive. It is the ability of your decision-making system to process evidence and update its choices accordingly. Under this model, the line between free and unfree is clear. A person suffering from severe addiction or a traumatic brain injury is unfree because their behavior cannot be easily altered by persuasion, logic, or long-term consequences. Their reason-responsive machinery is compromised. So long as you are not being physically coerced by an outside force, an action is yours if it passes through your own deliberative, reason-responsive networks. Your choices are physically determined by your brain chemistry, but your brain chemistry is doing the exact work of weighing values and making a choice. How we define these boundaries dictates how we structure society. Our legal system relies on the assumption that individuals are absolute authors of their actions. When we discard the idea of magical free will, the foundation of human punishment fractures. If every human choice is the downstream effect of genetics, trauma, and environmental conditioning, then retributive justice, the idea that someone deserves to suffer simply because they made an evil choice, loses its moral weight. We cannot rationally punish an organism solely for being the terminus of a broken causal chain. This shift moves the focus from retribution toward a consequentialist model. Punishment is reevaluated as a tool for social containment and the rehabilitation of a deterministic brain, rather than a mechanism for exacting revenge on an agent who could not have done otherwise.
Yet, abandoning the concept of personal agency entirely carries severe risks. In 2008, psychologists found that when subjects read texts arguing free will was an illusion, they became significantly more likely to cheat on subsequent tests. Removing the belief in agency reliably decreases motivation and strips away ethical guardrails. Philosopher P.F. Strawson pointed out that treating each other entirely as biological algorithms is practically impossible anyway. Our society is held together by reactive attitudes: gratitude, resentment, respect, and guilt. To abandon these emotional responses is to abandon the core of human connection.
We evaluate the intent behind an action, regardless of its deterministic origins. The brain is not a static machine. Through neuroplasticity, the conscious effort you exert today physically rewires your neural pathways. Your deliberate reflections, learning, and self-correction feed directly back into the system, literally programming the subconscious impulses that will guide you tomorrow. You did not choose the genes you were born with, the environment that raised you, or the physical laws governing yourselves. But you are not a passive spectator. Your conscious, reasoning mind is an active, vital node in the unbroken causal chain that dictates the future.